I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Black Orchestra and the Resistance expansion from Starling Games. Black Orchestra has actually been out for quite some time now. It's a game in which you and the other players cooperatively work together to try to assassinate Hitler. The Resistance expansion is a relatively new expansion from Starling Games. It was actually just on crowdfunding. I was hoping to have coverage up in time for the crowdfunding campaign. It did end. You can still late pledge. You can go ahead and check that out. Additionally, you may have seen my coverage on the Valkyrie, not really expansion standalone, the Valkyrie standalone game, which effectively takes the Black Orchestra experience and shrinks it to a half-hour playtime at the cost of some of the mechanics of the game. You can go ahead and check out my review on that. In this video, we're going to be talking about what Black Orchestra does. Loosely, I won't be getting into all the rules. It's very similar to Valkyrie at a high level, lots of small differences going on. We'll talk about what the Resistance expansion adds, my thoughts on all of them, as well as my thoughts on these compared to Valkyrie, because I actually played Valkyrie before ever playing Black Orchestra, and it's very interesting to me to go from the simpler, faster game to the more involved experience. With that said, let's go ahead and dive into it. The general idea of the game is you're going to have a limited number of actions each round. You're going to have 3 actions you can take, although you're usually going to be taking the Conspire action. Very rarely you can't afford the risk that comes with the Conspire action, so you might not. But usually, you'll go ahead and take the Conspire action, which is limited to once per round from your 3 actions. For each action you spend on it, you roll a die. Let's say we roll like that. That's a decent, actually fairly typical roll. I usually hope for better, but this can happen. This would go over here on the descent track when you have 3 of those, and yes, there are spaces for them. No, you can't see it. Even in person, you can't really tell it's there, but there are little spaces on the board. 3 spaces means you can take one of these rewards. And then this over here, this is bad for each one of these. Players are going to raise their suspicion by 1, which is not great. Players, we're going to talk about the player board shortly, but you don't want that. Honestly, this is a fairly typical roll. I got my 3 actions back. I got 1 good thing, 1 bad thing. Usually I'm hoping for a much better roll, maybe something actually I'm not even sure if that's a good roll. I get the full descent track covered. That's pretty decent. Usually you're hoping for something like that. If you can, it's not just 3s though. Honestly, more often you might get something like that. 5 actions and a die on the descent track. That's a generally good start to your turn. But what are you doing? I'm spending a whole lot of time talking about the Conspire action and the roll. What are you doing in the game? Ultimately, the main goal of the game is to try to get a plot card from this deck over here, from the Conspirator deck. There's a whole bunch of different cards in there. We'll show you some of them, but you want to get your hands on a plot card and carry out that plot to kill Hitler. The problem is you have a whole bunch of things in your way in order to do so. The biggest of which is you have to go ahead and raise your motivation. Characters have a few things going on their board. They have the number of items they can carry, they have the number of Conspirator cards they can carry, they also have their suspicion over here, as well as their motivation. Suspicion you want as low as possible. The higher the suspicion, the more likely your roll will fail when you actually try to carry out a plot, but also throughout the game there are things that higher suspicion are going to make your life a little harder. Motivation, you want to get it up. Your motivation starts off at very timid. That's going to affect how many cards you can hold in your dossier, how many cards from your Conspirator deck you can hold, but as you bump up your suspicion, your motivation, as you bump up motivation, you can carry more cards. Then at motivated, you can start using your player ability. Players all have their own asymmetric ability. Then when you move it up to committed, that's when you can actually start carrying out plots on Hitler. You need to be committed or reckless to carry out a plot. Some plots require reckless, other plots just require you to be committed enough to the cause. So you're trying to manage your player board because you can't just go out the gate and start assassinating Hitler. So you're trying to manage your actions to slowly power yourself up, keep your suspicion in check, and keep all the various enemies on the board. These, by the way, are from the expansion, but these little tokens over here, you're going to have Hitler and his conspirators wandering around the board, getting in your way and making your life a bit harder. So you're trying to avoid all of that. The actions you can take in the game are you can collect items, although first you have to go ahead and reveal an item. When you're in a spot, if you're in Prague over here, we can go ahead and reveal the item. We have explosives. That'll be helpful for some of our goals over here. Maybe we're in Vienna and reveal the keys. Now the relevance of that is then you can collect the item using an action. We can take the item, putting it on our board, and then if we get to a place where you can deliver the item, I think, is it Warsaw? No, not Warsaw. Over here. Wolfenstein's over here is a place where you can deliver the keys. So you're going to lower your suspicion by delivering the keys over here. So that's going to be another action you can take. Certain items just want to be shuffled around the board. So you can reveal them, pick them up over here, and then deliver them using your actions and keeping your suspicion in check. Those are going to be some of the actions. Conspire, we already covered. Dossier is going to have you drawing a card from your dossier, and there's a whole bunch over here. Let's just draw the top few and show you some of them. We have stalled investigation. We can use an action to discard this card, and all conspirators lower their suspicion by 1. This item is illegal, which will also have certain ramifications in the game, especially at higher suspicions. Then we have over here, we have effective planning, discard this card, gain 2 additional actions. That's just all around good. You're getting your actions back there. We have sniper over here. This is an example of a plot card. Plot cards are going to have the required elements. You are in the same space as Hitler, and you're at reckless. This is an example of a plot where you have to be fully at reckless to carry this out. But then there's additional optional elements that will help you make that plot easier. And so you're trying to balance this, do one more card, device plot, discard this card, reveal cards until you gain a plot card. That's very helpful to making sure you get a plot card, especially when they're shuffled a little bit lower. Although there are a decent amount of plot cards in the deck, you won't have a hard time finding one. Whether you find the one that is easier for you to carry out, that's a different story. But you're trying to take your actions. Again, you start your turn, you go ahead and you take up to 3 actions, usually the conspire action, you roll the dice, that's 2 on the descent track, plus 2 actions back. You use those actions to move around the board. Releasing a prisoner from prison is something you're going to have to manage when somebody gets arrested. In fact, that's going to be one of the lose conditions, which we can talk about in a second as well. And you're just trying to manage all of your, well, everything. You're trying to get your motivation higher, keep your suspicion lower, stay away from Hitler as conspirators until eventually you can carry out a plot. Along the way, you're going to be drawing an event card at the end of each of your turns. You're going to start off with deck number 1 and slowly move your way up over here until you get to deck number 7, and that, speaking of which, is the other way you lose the game. You win the game if you kill Hitler. You don't lose the game if you fail a plot, although your life will get much harder, similar to Valkyrie. Honestly, not as bad as Valkyrie, but still will get a lot harder. But the way you lose the game is either if all players are in prison at the same time, or if you can't draw an event card when you need to, or lastly, there is an instant death event card in the deck number 7 that can cause you to lose the game at any given point. Yes, there is an optional rule to take that out in case you don't want that sudden death aspect in the game. But that's the basic idea of the game. You are moving around the board, you're revealing items, you're setting yourself up to carry out these plots, you're delivering items to lower your suspicion, you're managing all your abilities, your motivation, and your suspicion, all in an attempt to eventually take out Hitler. When you are trying to take out Hitler, you have to get a number of successes equal to wherever Hitler's military support is, but you also have to do so while not rolling in enough failures relative to your suspicion. So for example, if I carry out a plot on medium suspicions and I roll these dice over here, right now, because I only got one of these, I'm fine and the plot succeeds. But at higher levels, even a single one of these can cause the plot to fail. At lower levels, you can have up to 3 of them. The problem is I only have 4 of these, and that means I wasn't able to carry out the plot because I needed 5. Of course, there are many things throughout the game that can give you extra things that will help you carry out those plots. Again, a lot of this will be familiar to you if you watch my Valkyrie review, because it does carry the same general arcs. There are definitely differences to the experience. There's more nuance, there's more action choice over here, the way the items work on the board, the event cards, lots of small differences, but overall the same vibe is very much there. As far as the expansion, let's talk about the expansion adds, because the expansion adds a few things. The first is it adds these nice little tokens over here. These are actually pretty helpful. You no longer have to constantly check where a small tiny token is on the board. They give much better visibility. Honestly, I really love these. Significantly better as far as, again, just instant board visibility. Although your player pawns start to look much smaller, when previously these were the things that were larger on the board, and now they're harder to find than the actual enemies you're facing off with, which might be better because, yourself you're going to have to find to take your turn. The enemies you might find at the wrong time. So that's a nice little quality of life upgrade. There's also more conspirators over here. We have a whole deck of new conspirators. My favorite is Helmuth over here. Well, I don't know if I haven't played as all of them, but Helmuth over here is my favorite because he simply subtracts one of these every time you roll the dice, giving him a lot, like the conspire action with him, it's never a choice. Whatever you roll, oh look at that, well we're safe anyway, 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 oh look at that, well there we go, finally. It took a lot of rolls to get there, but there's only one of these on each die, by the way. There's 2 of these symbols, and then there's a 1, 2, and 3, but whenever you roll these dice, including for plots, he counts 1 fewer of these, making him a very simple character, but a lot more reliable than the other characters. But that's going to be another thing. So you have new conspirators, and then you have 3 modules. You have the Red Orchestra, you have a Horst Kopkow, as well as the Kreisau Circle. Each of those adds different things to the game. I'm going to show you the general components over here because I put them off to the side so we can show you them. Let's start off, let's go in order. We have the Red Orchestra over here, which is effectively giving you a way to make the game easier. You see, the Red Orchestra is going to give you these missions you can engage with. So it just gives you missions, and those missions can have rewards that can help you. There's a little bit more nuance to it. There's tokens that can go onto the board as conspirators move into spots with those tokens. Missions can be discarded, missions that you were working towards, but these missions effectively, as you complete these, you basically have a goal. This one, by the way, this is an insane mission. This mission, you have to get arrested and released. Normally in the game, you're trying not to get arrested. If you're playing a 2-player game, one of the players has to get arrested. That's half your team is in that instant lose condition if another person, either way, it's a crazy mission. But you have missions that have these various goals to go through. Once you accomplish the mission, you get a reward, but more importantly, the mission moves to the successful missions area, where each successful mission is going to give you an additional die when you carry out a plot. This is generally just a helpful module, but more than the fact that it's helpful, meaning in case the game was too hard, also the game already has a difficulty modification on it, so if you find it's too easy, you can boost that difficulty too hard, and then go ahead and play with that module, because to me, the worst part about the you know what, this is thoughts. We're going to teach you about the expansions, then we'll cover this in my thoughts and review on everything. So yeah, the Red Orchestra basically gives you missions. Those missions do have a challenge in them, but you can engage with them whenever you want and however you want, and choose the ones that work for you while managing everything else, and they'll give you extra dice as you carry out a plot. Schwarze Kapelle, on the other hand, is the opposite. Schwarze Kapelle is going to be an additional enemy on the board with their own little token wandering around, and they are constantly chasing you down. That's all they do. They chase you down, at which point they're going to be drawing cards from these encounter decks over here, which are basically going to make your life harder for the most part. Again, there's some redeeming qualities and aspects to it, but for the most part, it's just something that's going to make your life a little bit harder, which, if you're playing with Red Orchestra, you can add that into balance. The game does suggest not having all the expansions added in at once, which I do agree with, but once you know how to utilize one or the other, you can mix and match them to whatever degree you want. So Schwarze Kapelle, chasing you around the board, making your life harder. Again, small redeeming things that make your life easier in some of the cards, but for the most part, just making your life harder. And then lastly, we have the Kreisau Circle over here. The Kreisau Circle is going to give you a bit of mix. So this one is actually nicely balanced in itself, in the sense that it gives you these allies that you're trying to find. Allies that, as you gather them, will give you various helpful abilities. The tricky part is until you gather your allies, you're actually rolling worse on the plot. So for example, you have less successes and more of those failures. That's just going to make your life harder until you can build up those allies. But again, it's self-balancing because the allies are going to help you out along the way, and eventually when you get to the very top, you actually get an additional success out of it. So it's kind of a self-balancing expansion in the way that it gives you something extra and, well, something easier and something harder. So that's basically what's going on in Black Orchestra. If you do want to see a full how to play of the base game of Black Orchestra, you can check that out. Asaf from Easy Board Games did that over on the channel. I'll try to link to it below. If you want to check out my thoughts on Valkyrie, you can check that out as well. But from there, let's go and dive into my general review, where I'll be covering what I like, don't like, and see others not liking, specifically getting into the expansions, then a comparison to Valkyrie, and then my final thoughts. Links and timestamps to everything down below. So let's start off with what I like. In general, there's a great atmosphere going on in this game, and I might, throughout my notes, there might be times where I incidentally reference my experience with Valkyrie. It'd be hard not to, but I'll separately cover that towards, in that timestamp area. Anyways, theme. There's a great atmosphere and theme as you play this out. You do feel hunted by the various characters over here. You do feel like they're constantly getting in the way and chasing you down, and you do feel like you're constantly trying to manage your suspicion and motivation in a way that will actually help you win. It feels like you're on a mission as you go through the cards, for better or worse. The cards will help you. You're going to have this deck over here that will constantly be getting in your way and making your life difficult, and you're going to be constantly going through the events, which again will be good and bad things that will make your life more difficult, but also help you out at times. You are constantly on your toes as you go through this game. It feels not just like a cooperative experience, but almost like you're running through a story. It feels like players are playing out a story in a historical basis, which kind of adds to the level of tension as to, like, there's a sense of reality. I mean, obviously it's not real, not by a long shot, but because this is based on such a iconic event in history, there is a sense of seriousness to what you're doing as you play the story out, as you try to set yourselves up to be able to take out Hitler, as you deal with the various things that get in your way. So from a thematic standpoint, it really does feel like a more immersive experience. Overall, it often does come down to that finishing blow, as you try to go ahead and deal a blow on Hitler, which again is not how you lose. You don't lose if you don't succeed, but nonetheless, it does feel a little deflationary. We'll come back to that as well. But it really does, you do manage to generally stay on top of the game and keep ahead of everything until it comes down to trying to execute on that blow and seeing if you're able to take out Hitler or not, or whether things are going to, end up with everyone in prison instead. And there's a lot of risk management in this game. Most of your decisions do come down to, not really rolling dice because you're kind of stuck with what you get, but rather most of your decisions come down to those risk management decisions, as how far to push things when you're trying to get something good, what bad things are you willing to deal with along the way in order to get them. That's most of your decision space, because constantly you can play a little game of staying out of trouble a little bit easier, but if you're trying to actually move the needle further ahead, it's a little harder to do so when you have to make those decisions as you go through it. As far as what I don't like in the game, despite the last thing I said, there is lower decision space than I would like in the game. It does feel very thematic and very immersive, and it does feel like you're going through a story, and there are choices you have to make, mostly about risk management. But a lot of the things you're doing in the game are rolling dice, where you have far less decision space than you'd like, outside of, do I take the conspire action, do I not? And generally I recommend it, the odds are in your favor overall. But then past that, you're just kind of going through the motions as to what the board lets you do for the most part, with the mindfulness that at times you are dealing with that risk management. A lot of times you're just moving around the board, you find an item, now you try to deliver it, you gather more cards, you have to try to level up your motivation so you can hold more cards. There's a sequence that mostly feels a little bit straightforward. The dice feel like a huge part of the game, but a very small decision space part of the game, and so it's a lower decision space than I would like overall, while being very thematic and still giving you decisions to go through it. The conspire action feels like a must-have. I don't know how much I care about this because there are times that you really don't want to get bad results, but for the most part, the conspire action feels something you're going to be doing all the time because the odds generally favor it, and it's usually worth the risk of doing so to get those extra action as well as the descent track as well. So that's generally something that I find it's nearly essential to the point that I almost wish the game just said, start your turn by rolling 3 dice and then do this, which kind of to a certain extent is what Valkyrie did. Valkyrie made that change that just have you rolling the dice and dealing with the consequences instead of having a choice around the dice. So speaking of Valkyrie, it does have a similar problem as Valkyrie in the sense that once you fail an assassination attempt, to me it kind of feels like the game should be lost at that point. It's not. You kind of have to rebuild some things and then go again after him. But again, it usually feels like a large step backwards. I do kind of wish it came down to winning or losing, but then you'd have the same problem with Valkyrie as to the fact that your entire win and lose on this longer experience than Valkyrie would still come down to the roll of a dice and how badly you rolled and whether you failed because of the luck of the draw. So I understand why it's not an instant fail, but it still feels frustrating to recover and pick up from a failure on a plot assassination. And then lastly, I'll say the gameplay is kind of repetitive game to game, although it's worth noting the expansions do fix this to a large extent. The gameplay, for the most part, despite the fact there's a large variety of the actual cards you're dealing with in the game, the overall feeling of what you're doing feels mostly somewhat repetitive as far as the arc of what you're doing and how it plays out. The cards do mix things up as far as what challenges you're facing along the way, but until you add expansions, it feels repetitious game to game. As far as what I can see others not liking, the game is very dice dependent. I don't mind the fact that the game is dice dependent. I just mind the fact that that seems to be the biggest decision space without decisions. Like, I wish there were more decisions in the game. But if you don't like the fact that you're rolling dice and boom, there you go. You gave up 3 actions for that. That kind of thing will happen, especially when it comes down to the final blow when you're trying to kill Hitler. That's going to be even worse. So it's very dice dependent. You do have to be mindful of that. And then lastly, of course, and obviously, the theme. As much as I'm sitting here being like, yay, let's kill Hitler, some people just don't want a board game about Hitler, period, full stop. As far as the expansions over here, we're going to have thoughts on each of them because I do have different opinions on the expansions. Red Orchestra is easily my favorite expansion because those missions really give you something else to strive for, which really mixes up the gameplay experience. It makes the game a little bit easier. Again, you can balance that by just turning the game to hard or by adding in Schwarze Kapelle, although I do have thoughts about that. But Red Orchestra in general, I just feel is overall the best expansion in the way that it really forces players to engage with a significantly different decision space. Again, things like trying to get imprisoned, suddenly you're playing a whole different game than you were before that mission ever existed. And there's a lot of missions. That one is one of the crazier ones, but there's a lot of missions that generally just shift up the things you're doing, and they also give you rewards. So they give you that more likely to succeed at the end kind of aspect, but also the more things along the way that are more engaging and force you to reevaluate what you're doing. Schwarze Kapelle, on the other hand, I didn't like quite as much. That one just felt like I'm constantly playing a keep away game from the character, which isn't bad. Again, it kind of adds an element of toughness to the game, but I think that made me feel a bit more like busy work than simply a difficulty escalation. And the busy work feeling of it, I didn't love. It wasn't the worst, but instinctively, I prefer not to play with it as much because it kind of felt a bit more in that just stay away, just stay away, just stay away. There's things you can do to push them back, but it didn't feel as rewarding so much as something else I have to do on my turn to stop the bad thing from happening, which again, in theory, that's kind of what all cooperative games come down to. I think sometimes you feel it a bit more, and in this case, I felt it a bit more. Past that, as far as the Chrysler Circle overall I enjoyed. The fact that again, it kind of gives you more things to focus on, similar to the Red Orchestra, not nearly as interesting in my opinion, but nonetheless it does give you these extra allies to try to seek out and add to your board, and then it does have that internal difficulty modification to it, so it's a nice expansion. I liked it. I think I would definitely consider playing with it, but Red Orchestra is easily my favorite from it. As far as comparisons to Valkyrie, it is very hard to Valkyrie's interesting. I played Valkyrie and I enjoyed Valkyrie for what Valkyrie was. I think I enjoyed Valkyrie far less after playing through Black Orchestra, with the caveat that Valkyrie is less time to set up, less time to play, significantly simpler to get into, so I understand the appeal of Valkyrie, but having played Black Orchestra, I think I'm less likely to go back to Valkyrie. Because Black Orchestra is still a light enough game. It's not a super heavy game. There's more going on here, but it's not super heavy. The biggest complaint is honestly less about the complexity of it and more about this is a slightly longer experience, whereas Valkyrie is like an easy game to say, okay, just as soon as you try to kill him, you either win or you lose, because it's a 20 to 30 minute game. What's the big deal? Versus this one is a bit more involved, but I like that bit more involved. I thought that this one felt it really gave you just a drop more that added to the experience in a way that Valkyrie, while I understand and appreciate the merits of, I think that I prefer the Black Orchestra experience, especially once you add in the Resistance expansions. As far as final thoughts on Black Orchestra, overall this is still going to be a 3.5 out of 5 for me, as Valkyrie was. Despite the fact that I do prefer this, it doesn't bump into that 4 territory. Because this was a better experience, for sure. And again, Valkyrie wasn't bad to begin with, but this was a better experience. This was more immersive. It felt more like, you're being chased in the game. There's more, honestly, even just the way the items work and you're flipping them over and delivering them, felt more control over there. The Conspire action, as much as I don't like the fact that it feels mandatory to an extent, it is a more fun action to, like, sometimes you have like a die roll where you're like, well, sometimes you have that die roll, but other times you roll the dice, like, there are turns where you will get that, and that is one of the best feelings in the game right there. It is so satisfying to be like, and I have 9 actions this turn, I feel crazy powerful, and it will happen across the course of a game, it probably will happen. And so overall, this is still a solid experience where I like the theme, I like the sense of story being played out, but until you add the expansions, that sense of story feels like it lasts you 1 or 2 games, at which point you're going through repetitious moments of it. Versus Resistance will definitely add to the experience for those looking to make this game last longer and feel more engaging as you play through it multiple times. Overall, it's a 3.5 out of 5. I enjoyed this one and definitely recommend picking up the Resistance expansion if you are a fan of the base game. Past that, as far as other game recommendations, if you're looking for a thematic, somewhat historical based aspect, check out this War of Mine for a punishing cooperative game that will make you wish you were playing this one instead, just as far as your ability to win. And then secondly, check out Dead of Winter. Past the trader mechanic, this did kind of bring back vibes of Dead of Winter, of that need to work together with other players to gather things, to collect things, and then try to ultimately survive. But of course, Dead of Winter has a trader mechanic, which will make it a little different too. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.